Now we're good.
Well, you can't have that happen more in 2 seconds. Anyway, a good evening, the Thin Line crew. It is me, Messy Jessie, or Jessie, aka, coming onto our new show with the very lovely and mysterious
Hey,
Colleen.
actually not mysterious or lovely, but yeah, you have absolutely spectacular Tracy and Tracy. She's the East Coast director of the First Responder Therapy Dog Program. And we
Hi,
are
everyone.
so happy to talk with you because this is, we were talking a little bit before the show that we have some things in common with our dogs. And
Yes.
it's so cool. And we want to hear all about the program because we deal in the thin line with first responders of all kinds, military, and dispatch everybody, right? And PTSD that sometimes you get from these occupations and what
Yep.
these dogs can do. So why don't you start off telling us all about your program?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us first and foremost. But so first responder therapy dogs is kind of a niche in a way. It focuses on supporting the mental health needs of first responders specifically through the use of trained and certified therapy dog teams. We are a national group, so we have teams across the country and in 46 states as of today. And really, the whole premise of what we do is very similar to other therapy dog groups in the sense of our dogs are trained and the handlers are trained to provide love and affection to anyone that they come in contact with on some level. And our specific population that we work with is the first responder. And there is some overlap too with veterans because we do some kind of additional support with veterans as well, but we also have a lot of first responders that are veterans themselves. So it's kind of an intertwined population. But we really, our kind of bread and butter is we bring dogs and we bring our dogs to stations, to dispatch locations, to EMS locations, to wildland base campfires, police fire, any first responder across the country that has an interest in our dogs visiting. And we really, it's the simplest science on some level, but it is the most effective. It's such an effective tool for us to provide, but for first responders to absorb as well. So we bring the dogs in, and for a lot of our visits, they're happy visits and they're visits just to kind of break up the shift for them. You know, first responders are a unique group because they spend a lot of time and long durations of time, whether it be at a station or at their location or in a cruiser, or it's a unique kind of population in that sense. So a lot of our visits are directly at their station. So we bring the dogs to them and they're just able to spend time while they're decompressing. So maybe when they're not on a call, while they're watching some TV, while they're communicating with each other, while they're doing their chores, while they're cooking their breakfast, whatever it is, and they're able to spend time with the dog, and it lightens the mood immediately. The other piece to what we do is we visit first responders when maybe their day is not gone so well and there is some more of a traumatic incident or they're in a process of debriefing from something that's taken place. And the dogs are an additional tool that can be used to help support kind of those emotional needs that they may need in those moments. And I think for most people who have worked with therapy animals in general, animal assisted therapy has been around for a very long time at this point. And even before people knew what it was, they were doing it. And I think the first responder community, what has been a unique thing with our group, and we obviously are only still a couple of years old in some sense, but is the group itself is perceived as this kind of tough and rugged and resistant group of individuals. And I think as much as that is true, I think the piece that we kind of hit, which really is a little bit different than other forms of therapy in a way, is that we bring in a dog who is loving and sweet and reminds them of home. And before they even know that they've connected with the dog, they've connected with the dog. And the dog speaks to a piece of them that they didn't know that they needed to kind of connect with in that moment. And it does something different than a human would in the sense of conversation. There doesn't need to be any conversation. They simply provide a support that no one can understand and no one can physically argue in a way, but it's a support that they need in that moment. And it truly makes such a difference. And I think any person who has been involved with any level of animal assisted therapy in any capacity has had those moments where you witness something that is just truly magical, and there's no ability to replace it in any other capacity with a person or a device or any other kind of tool that you could use, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. That is amazing. Like, I just think of these big, people, big guys, like you're saying, they're rough and tough, and how a dog can literally read their energy and like, hey bud, I'm here for you, like it's amazing what animals can do.
It really is. And like I said, it's interesting because a lot of the connections that at least I've been a part of, I honestly don't know until I leave. And you kind of hear different pieces of information after you leave. A lot of times you go into situations and you don't really know much about what's going on. You just know that there's a need, or you know that you're doing a visit at a specific department. And you leave and you notice little things, but you're not necessarily able to put different pieces together until sometimes you leave that environment and you hear different pieces of information that people share with you. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like what did I just kind of witness in a way? And it's just something so special. It really is. It's something that I wish everyone could have the experience in terms of witnessing, because it really, it fills your heart in a different way than you could ever imagine.
Yeah. I know in our area, we have, for the courthouses, they have like a support dog that goes in with victims of violent crimes. And they go in there to support them. So they're trained to know if there's an anxiety attack coming, they know how to get up on that person and just, calm them down. And so is that kind of also what the dogs do too, is they go in and they know and are trained to know the difference between an anxiety attack or, it's amazing what they can do, but
it really is. So our dogs are technically not specialty trained in that way. We do have dogs that are actually dual certified as service dogs for their handler as well as therapy dogs for others. But a lot of the dogs are not, none of the dogs, to my knowledge, are specifically trained in that way to sense that specifically. What I will say, though, which is very interesting about animals in general, is with or without the training, they sense things and they sense emotion in such a different way. And like I said, I will say my dogs have never been physically trained for that. But when I tell you, if we walked into a room of 10 or 15 people and there was someone that, in my opinion, you could use the support more than others, they are they naturally gravitate to them in some way. And I don't know if it's something that's released or something that's connected, but the dogs sense things that we only can honestly hope to in some capacity, and whether they're trained or whether they're not trained. And I always kind of say, when people will say to me, oh, I miss my dog, or I wish my dog could do this. And I am a firm believer in the sense that everyone's dog or anyone's animal is their own personal therapy animal in a way, because they know things about you even before you know it about yourself. They know when you're sick, they know when you're not feeling right. They just have a certain ability to sense that. And like I said, I think that obviously there's tiered levels in terms of training that go along with certain skill sets. But in terms of general understanding of humans, I think animals honestly blow most humans out of the water with their connection that way,
Yeah. It's interesting too. I think I was reading an article probably about 6 months ago, and it was in a law enforcement magazine that my Leo gets. And I read it, and they were talking about the scientific connections with animals, therapy animals. They're also saying that we humans give off like a hormone, like there's a stress hormone that they can smell. it's interesting to see scientifically that these animals can pick up on different changes within a human body within a split second. It was just completely amazing. And
You're in my head again, Jesse. I don't like it.
do what?
I was thinking about it. It's the stress hormone, the cortisol raises when we have an anxiety attack. And our animals can sense it and smell it. And that's why these therapy dogs, when you were talking about Tracy, they pick up the people who seem to need them the most. It's that cortisol. I've taken my bloodhound to funerals, things like that. Not like in the building, but at memorial services, I should say. And she just makes a beeline for the person who needs her the most and crawls up in their lap. It's phenomenal what these dogs can do, and it's just so amazing. So when did this organization start, Tracy?
So we started in 2021, and we started with one dog named Kara, who is kind of a household name, I feel like, for everyone involved in our organization at this point. But she is a golden retriever out in California, the San Rafael area, and she honestly she was actually a guide. She was in the guide dogs for the blind, and they don't call it failing out, but they call it a career change when they're too friendly. And she wasn't a good fit for that job, but her calling was in a whole different area. And so Heidi Carmen, our executive director and kind of the creator and founder of First Responder Therapy Dogs, noticed that Kareth just had a certain love for a uniform, to be honest with you. And she really was drawn to firefighters and paramedics that were coming into the hospital. She had spent some time in the emergency room with the nursing staff and that kind of thing. And she started bringing Kareth to local fire departments and local wildland base camp fires. And that is how it started. And in all honesty, it has been picking up steam ever since. So in a very short time. So my first dog, Sparky, was... I gently and positively stalked Heidi, but when I was going through, so I knew I work as a high school guidance counselor. That's my real job, to support my passion project. I joke all the time. I tell both dogs, I go, Mom needs a real job to support her passion project. But when I was going about the training side of it, I knew I wanted to train a therapy dog, and I couldn't figure out what the best fit would be for both myself as well as Sparky. And Sparky, I joke all the time, is like an aggressive love machine. She's a Labradoodle who wiggles and bops her head into people's kneecaps. And she just is like an exuberant, like energetic love machine. And so we had done some trials at, nursing homes and things like that. And it's just every visit I left and I said, this is not the right fit. I just don't know what I want to do with this. And I happened to come across First Responder Therapy Dogs when they were just starting out and when they had just kind of launched their website. And I reached out to Heidi. And at that point, they were all out in California, or at least on the West Coast. And I said, have you ever thought about certifying a team on the East Coast? Like, I would be very interested. My husband's a firefighter. So when I saw the group, it just fit. I said, this is the right fit for us. And I had always said, if you're going to spend your time volunteering, you want it to be connected to your family. You want it to be something you enjoy to do. And you want it to bring something good to people you genuinely care about. And so it just seemed like such a perfect fit for her, for me. And so Heidi wrote right back to me and she said, we just actually started a certification process. And I said, well, I would be very interested in doing this. So that's kind of how the story wrote. And we were actually the first team on the East Coast to certify in 2022. And we were the 12th team in the country at that point. Fast forward a couple very short years, and we have over 400 teams now in 46 states. So, and it's been very interesting, I'll say, even in Massachusetts. So when I first started, it was interesting. I would call a department. And now I obviously had some connections just as a result of my husband being involved, which did help kind of get the ball rolling with this. But I would be on the phone with a chief or someone involved, and I would say the term therapy dog, and then there would be like a long pause. And then I would have to just clarify what I meant by that, because I clearly sensed it was a new term in this area, and there was an immediate kind of resistance of like I don't know how I feel about that. And I would explain, I'd say, listen, this is a dog and myself coming in. The dog does the work. We're not doing a ton of talk. This is meant for something that they will really enjoy. And it was amazing because I would go into a department for the first time. And again, they had their feelers out. They weren't quite sure who I was. They weren't quite sure about the process. And I never had to have another discussion after our first visit on any department I've ever visited, because the overall and overarching theme with when Sparky would enter, as is with every dog that enters, is you'd have a bunch of grown adults, mostly men, but grown adults that would boil down on their hands and knees and squeal with delight the minute you would walk into a station.
Allegedly, okay, Tracy, allegedly.
Yeah, and, it was like such an unbelievable thing to witness. And my husband, actually, interestingly enough, had never really seen a therapy dog in action. And I, working in public schools, have seen therapy dogs. So I'm familiar with what they do and familiar with kind of the positive things that they bring. And he had never seen it in action. And he kind of kept saying to me, like, what exactly are you doing with this? I'd go to the training and then I'd come home and he'd be like, I don't fully understand. And so right around the time when we were going through the certification process, I had scheduled a training visit at his station with all of his coworkers. And it happened to coincide with 3 back-to-back very, very difficult calls that they had as a department. And I went in and I did my thing and I left, and he called me on the way home that day and he said, so I don't need you to explain it anymore. He goes, I don't know if you understand this, but some of these guys have not talked to each other in like years. He goes, they were happy. They weren't on their phones. They were talking with each other. They were goofy. They were light and airy. And that is exactly the beauty of what they do, is they come into a situation and it's a natural distraction that I don't think people are expecting, but people welcome with open arms. Everyone loves a fluffy, goofy dog. There's very few people that would, turn away from that. And, and they all have their own personalities. And I think part of being the handler, and I joke around all the time that I'm their personal chauffeur and leash holder, but part of being a handler to a therapy dog is understanding kind of their quirkiness and using that to what they can do. And, Sparky, I will say, is a quirky diva doodle. And she, likes to sit in dispatch chairs when people get up. And she likes to be wheeled from station to station on occasion. And she is just, those are her things. I mean, she's a riot, and it gets people laughing. It gets people thinking of something that they're not supposed to be thinking about, right? They're at work. They're supposed to be serious. And the hard part with their job is, it's 24 hours, it's 12 hours, they're long shifts, and there's not a ton of distraction. They're coming in with life stressors, they're leaving with work stressors, and there's not a ton of decompression time there, especially if it's a busy shift or they're up all night with a shift. There's not a ton of downtime. And the downtime that they have, they're cleaning, they're cooking, they're doing things that they have to get done too. So I think the nice part about the dog coming into their station and their space is it gives them a forced interaction and a forced moment where they can just be. And there's no other expectation other than enjoying a dog, enjoying each other, enjoying a few laughs, enjoying some breakfast, right? It kind of all goes hand in hand. And it really is, it's just a magical recipe together.
Do you mind if I share the picture of you and your dogs from the website?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to share this. This is so cool. So it always takes me, there we go. And here is Tracy and her pups. Isn't that cool?
Aww.
I know.
They're so cute.
Just adorable. Yes. Yes. So you can, and we are going to, in the description of the show, we're going to put your website on there and contact information and everything. We'll link to it. This is so magical. animals don't have a way. They say that a cat sitting on your lap, and if you just like petting the cat, it lowers your BP and your heart rate. It brings everything down, unless the cat's got its claws in you, maybe be petted. It's that.
Yeah.
But, typically it's that just that connection, with our animals. And for me, it's I care for a lot of animals here on the farm, but that connection that we have, it just speaks to your soul. And I think even
Yes.
if you weren't raised with a dog, if you walk into a situation with the dog who's genuinely enthusiastic to see you, you respond to it.
Yep.
I think most people probably were raised with the dog, unless maybe I think most people have had a dog somehow in their life at some point. And I've met very few people who are terrified of dogs. Have you
Mhm.
ever run into?
To be honest, every now and then, and it's one of those things that I always say too, sometimes people's needs in the moment, it's like every other tool that you use in life, right? For some people, the tool isn't right. It's rare, I will say, even for people who maybe don't need the therapy side of it and the physical kind of positives that come with it. I think most people enjoy just petting a dog. I think, though, every now and then, do you hit someone that maybe isn't as invested in the dog? You do. But it's rare. And it's even the people that I find who don't fully get into it appreciate what we do with it. So it's an interesting, it's a mutual respect. And like I said, it's one of those things that I'll say that for any person that you come in contact with, their needs are going to be different than your needs and are going to be different than the needs next to them. The goal is to provide everyone with a bunch of different things, and hopefully the people who need it most are the ones that kind of gravitate to it, and the dog gravitates to them. And that's kind of the hope, because again, our intervention is one of those things. And again, I think anyone who's worked within any type of therapy animal can say there are people that you come into contact with that I do say we change their trajectory in that moment, in that day. Now, does it change it permanently? Maybe not. But there are moments that you're supposed to be where you're supposed to be, and that dog has done their job, and there is something in that moment that they needed to be a part of, and that person needed in that moment. And it honestly, like I said, it happens more times than I think people even know, because a lot of times that's not something that you're necessarily is disclosed to you. But there's enough, I don't even like to say coincidences, because I don't think they're coincidences, but there's enough interactions that take place on an average visit that just, in your gut, there was something that was needed in that moment, and there by the person, and the dog provided it in whatever capacity that was.
That's interesting. So what does it take to be part of the team? I mean, say somebody around here is very interested in providing those awesome things that you guys do. This is so great. But what does it take for somebody to do and to join and be part of?
So it depends on which stage you are with your dog. So for a dog that's maybe older, or we do have a lot of teams that are certified with other organizations. So we do have dual certification, meaning we have dogs, we don't only allow dogs that are not connected to other groups. So we do have plenty of dogs that are connected to multiple groups. So we have some dogs that, visit airports. We have some dogs that visit schools. We also have some dogs that just are solely with our organization. So we're flexible with that. So if your dog is already certified with somebody, most likely they have gone through the behavioral components that would be required for our group already. We do require the Canine Good Citizenship Test, which is kind of, I call it the SATs for dog behavior and expectation. It really is just because we are a national organization. It's our way of having a consistent measurement, so that we know that any dog that's going into kind of the field has that general behavior down pat, and that's been a certified thing. That's the first step from a dog's perspective. So again, we have a lot of people that reach out to us that just got a puppy. And that process is going to obviously take significantly longer than if you have a 6-year-old that's already gone through the process and already has kind of that behavioral component. Once they get that piece done, there's some online coursework that the handler actually does. So we have some courses that the handler does. Really, it's to prepare them. So obviously, every person that we work with has a little bit of a different background. I will say a good chunk of our handlers are first responders themselves or are connected in some capacity. They're spouses, maybe they're on peer support, maybe they're nurses or some sort of triage. They're in some sort of capacity connected to the group. We also have though people that just want to be good citizens and help support others and have absolutely no connection to first responders at all. We try to provide just some basic information because again, you're going into dispatch locations, you're going into EMS locations, you're going into police, fire stations where at any given minute, right, calm turns into chaos a little bit.
Yeah.
And we obviously want to prepare our handlers for the mental side of that because there definitely is something very real about secondhand trauma. And we really try to support our handlers to make sure that we're putting them in positions that are going to be successful as well for them. So that's the second component. And then the third component is more of a behavioral observation. Again, there's a lot of people with very qualified dogs, but going into a dispatch location where there are sounds and tones or a fire station where you've got a siren or a truck leaving, even in the best conditions, there are some dogs that do very well in some settings and they're just not comfortable in those. So we do have kind of more of a self-reported behavioral observation to make sure your dog is comfortable in that setting, make sure the noises work well with them and that they're able to do the job and also enjoy it. Because for anyone who's had a therapy dog, I'll say from my own perspective, when I get the vests out, both my dogs are very vest driven. They know when the vest comes out, it's time to go to work. And they love the job. They love to work. They know what's coming with it. They know that they're going to get, all kinds of attention and love and, all the funny stuff and a couple cheddar bites along the way. And they're happy to go, And so for us, we want it to be both mutually beneficial for the handler as well as the dog. So to make sure kind of all those components, those are kind of the big things. The dog also has to be 18 months or older, which really lines up with typical canine good citizenship testing because, you want to get through the adolescence. You want to get through, we're looking for college age dogs and higher, essentially. You want them to get through all that puppy behavior so that they're in a good position and their disposition kind of is ironed out. And then, like I said, once all of that is in the mix, that's pretty much our certification process. And again, for some people, it's a pretty quick process to go through because of their background and their dog's experience. And for others, it takes a little bit longer. I worked with my dogs for about 2 years each. They were just about 2 when they both certified. So it is one of those things that, again, depending upon the breed, the dog, what you need to kind of iron out behavior wise, because they all have things that you work with. It's going to take different amounts of time. And we also have no breed restrictions. So we have everything from a 5-pound little toy poodle all the way up to a 175-pound Irish wolfhound and everything in between. So we have any breed that is a good fit disposition wise.
So my bulldog would probably work, but her manners are out. Not even.
Good bulldog.
She slobbers all over the place. I don't think they'll enjoy that.
You'd be surprised, actually. I think you'd be surprised with that.
It's funny. I can show her a biscuit and it's like.
This is really cool, and I looked at all the training requirements. It's stuff that I've done for pet partners.
Yep.
So I like the fact that if you're certified already in something, you can probably get certified pretty easily with your organization. Yep. I think this is really phenomenal, and I had not thought of it before. So I stumbled across the website. When I was doing some research for good topics for the show, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I don't know, like, is there a way on your page to see like teams in your area?
So
Yeah.
we do have individual states listed. We don't list teams like in terms of their locations, just for information, just for confidentiality reasons. But if you were to let us know where you're located, we can link you up. A lot of times we will almost provide like mentorship or connect you with a team that maybe can answer questions specific to your area. And we have a lot of people reach out for a lot of different reasons, but that is one of them.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, when we first started in Massachusetts, the biggest thing that we did some bigger events in our area. We have some pretty good sized first responder stair climbs and things, that are kind of geared to a lot of first responders coming together for different organizations. And so we really worked to get some outreach into those areas. And it's interesting because we have about 30 or so teams now in Massachusetts. And I would say 90% of them I met at one of those types of events or through word of mouth. That is how our group has spread. It really has. And, our goal is obviously to have a team in every crevice of the United States. That is, I think, everyone's goal in our organization to provide, because it's amazing how many requests we get. And we really try our best to be able to satisfy every request that we get. We want every first responder who wants any type of therapy dog support to be able to access us. And I know that is kind of our long-term goal, but one of the reasons we've spread in certain areas has been that type of thing. It's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of sharing what we do. Someone's connected to our group and all of a sudden they start talking at a different station. And before you know it, it's, oh, I have a dog that I think would be great. And oh my gosh, I've never even thought about that. Or how do I get connected with an organization? And, it's amazing how we've kind of trickled into different areas just through that communication style.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's very neat. I know the Veteran Sanctuary at ISU, the college here, they have a dog that's full time. It's always in
Yep.
there for our veterans, and it really helps. It
Yeah.
really helps. Do you connect much with veterans groups?
So we actually do. Like I said, it's interesting because there's a lot of overlap. So I know specifically in our area, we do a lot of yellow ribbon events for local organizations. It's actually linked through the Red Cross, but again, I actually was just at Harvard University for a veteran and first responder summit conference. So though it's not directly tied to our mission in the sense of obviously first responders are the community that I would say actively reach the most. It is amazing how many first responders are veterans. That's the first step. And then how many people are kind of secondarily connected in some capacity. So like I said, through word of mouth, we do have a lot of teams that do work with veterans, not necessarily like they're going out searching for it, but it is amazing how many people that we get requests from. And like I said, we really try our best. If we have a team available, we really do our best to satisfy whatever request we get in whatever capacity. But, we've been connected for certain activities with like Home Base, which is a big, veteran support organization. So again, there's a lot of overlap there. And it's one of those things that I think we all recognize kind of how they're both interconnected in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I wished we would have known about this earlier because I know somebody that could definitely use, some love. But yeah, it's just amazing how you guys have grown and you're doing so well. And yeah, thank you for what you do because it's, very important for first responders to have that support and sometimes not make it so obvious too. It's like, oh, it's a dog, but deep down they're like, this is like my breath for the day, and it's just, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, there's a lot of moments that No, it's the most special thing. I mean, I I tell my kids all the time, I said, put your earmuffs on because mom's going to say something, and I don't really mean it to you, but it is truly one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And obviously, other than having a family and everything else, I say all the time, Sparky was such a unique dog, and she is such a unique dog still to this day. But the reason why I found this group is because of her. My second dog, Blaze, I love him so much, and I call him my sloth dog because he's a 2-year-old that acts like a 22-year-old man. He's just an old soul, and he just flops down. And I joke all the time, but if he was my first dog, I would have never found this group because he would have been fine at libraries. He would have been fine in all these different venues, and I probably would have never gotten to the connection of where I was meant to be. And so I tell Sparky, she's my soul sister, but I tell her every day that the reason why I found this group was because of her. And she has not only led me to this, but her leash has led me to so many moments. And like I said, they're moments. They're moments that it's almost like you take a little picture in your head. And we do obviously get pictures with a lot of moments with first responders, but those tend to be more the light and airy visits when we're going, and they get their cameras out, and it's like a funny little thing. A lot of the dogs love to take their picture. There are moments though that would not be something I would ever photograph, but are forever etched in my mind, that you just saw a connection that you'll never be able to truly explain. And one specific story that I do always share, because this was one that I kind of knew about and only knew glimpses of it, but kind of pieced together some additional things. I got a direct message, and this is the interesting thing about social media, is a lot of people will reach out through social media that, just happen to follow what you do and are connected in some way. And so I had someone's significant other reach out to me, and she explained that her boyfriend at the time was going to be leaving his department because of occupational cancer to get treatment. And she wondered if I had ever gone to his department and if I would go if I hadn't. So I immediately called the chief. I had not ever connected with that department. I explained that someone reached out. This is what we were hoping to do. He said, come on in. And so we went. And so Sparky and I got in the car, and we went on a Sunday, and we showed up, and I had no knowledge of who this person was, who the guy was. I didn't know really anything about him other than his first name. And, it's interesting because as much as you introduce yourself, I don't ever introduce myself. I just introduce Sparky. So no one ever says to me, hi, I'm so-and-so. They just talk immediately to the dog. So I went, we did our visit. It was a great visit. There were probably about 50 people on that day. So it was a big department, and we left. And I honestly didn't know if we had seen him or not seen him. I was just really hopeful we had. And so I reached back out and I said, listen, we had a great visit. I really hope we met him, because I said we tried to see everybody. And she immediately said, she sent me a picture of him. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, I have to tell you this. I said, Sparky doesn't actually give a lot of kisses. She's just, she's a wiggler. She's not as much of a kisser. And it's the only person she kissed 3 times in that visit. And so I said to her, I said to the woman, I said, I'm 99, because, it was a little bit of a different picture. I said, we were back and forth. I said, I am almost positive that's the guy she kissed the whole visit. And so she must have connected with, her boyfriend. And sure enough, that was him. And I said, again, it's those types of things that are almost eerie in a way, and you don't know it in the moment. But when you find out little pieces of information, and like I said, I'm sure that there are so many more that I don't know anything about, it like haunts you in the best way possible, because again, that was something that I could never have scripted. I could never have forced her to kiss a person that she didn't want to kiss. And there was something about him that she loved in that moment. And I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup in that situation, and it was just something so special. And I keep that story so close to my heart because that to me is 100% representative of what they do every single time they engage with people in different ways. You know, there's something that a person needs, they fulfill it. And again, 9 times out of 10, you're probably never going to know what took place between the two of them, but it's something so special.
Yeah. Oh
That's
my
really
gosh.
remarkable.
I almost cried there for a second.
I know. I
"Ooh,
was feeling that a
Lord."
little bit.
It still gets me choked up when I talk about it, to be honest with you. It's just, it was such a, it was just such a, like, again, it almost took my breath away, and the whole trans, you know, everything, how everything transpired. So
That's really something.
Yeah. Gosh.
Wow. That's remarkable. And for all of the everybody that we're talking with Tracy with the first responder therapy dogs, and I just can't, like, God, I'm sorry. It's just so emotional. That's so emotional.
it
I don't know how they know. Dogs know. Dogs know. So
Yep.
Yeah.
but the next best thing would be the pygmy goat therapy program. One of those goats into a fire station would be so fun.
Can we put sweaters
Um,
on them too?
we need to go through some of these classes. But yeah, I just can imagine the goats like leaping from desk to desk. That would be a lot of fun.
Well, I just happened to see that there's a giant therapy bunny at one of the professional baseball teams. So, I mean, again, it's just amazing. It is amazing. And this bunny wears hats and glasses and the whole thing. I mean, it's hysterical.
That is amazing.
I know, isn't that's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you. Jess, do you have anything else?
No, I just truly, again, thank you for what you do. It's very, very important. And yeah, this has been an awesome episode, you guys. This is amazing. And we'll put the information on Facebook and on our website and everything on how to contact the organization.
And what I will say too is, if anyone needs, like I said, we have a form right on our website, whether it's a department, whether it's an individual first responder, whether it's an event, whatever the case may be, don't hesitate to request it, because again, we will do our darndest to try to fulfill it if we can. So please continue to request, because like I said, that is what we are here for.
This is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy, for your time. And as soon as you get this episode edited, and we don't edit, but we upload it, and I'll send you a link to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that you can share it. But it's really remarkable. We need more people like you in the world to help each other. This is what we're all about. We're supposed to help each other through this life. So it can be rough sometimes. So don't hesitate to reach out to Tracy and to this group. We will post again the link to the page, and let's get some help out there, especially when it comes in the form of it's help, but nobody knows it's help. It's just wiggles.
Yep.
And
it really
and slobber and kisses.
magic.
It's so awesome.
I'm telling you, I think my Sophie could do it. She's just going to have like a lot of slobber all over the place.
Well, we have some dogs that have their own little drool bibs. I mean, they're very fashionable, and
Really?
you know, you can just oh yeah.
I have a drool rag for Banshee when we go places, so it can be done.
It can be done. Yeah. Bulldogs are always a fan favorite.
Oh yeah, she's
yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna end this for the evening. And I know Tracy's on the East Coast, so it's getting late from her. So, and I know that she works in the morning, so we're gonna let her go. But this has been the most excellent conversation. I'm so excited. Again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. No, from the bottom of our heart, right back at you. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Catch you guys next week.